Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Premier Pundits podcast. It's Thursday night. We're looking ahead to game week 30 after the international break. Seems like such a long time ago. Of course, my name is Ben Dinnery, and I am joined by my esteemed co-host, the stat man, Mr. McKenna in the house. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, Ben. I'm happy to see the football back because I don't count the international break as football unless it's like Euro 2020 or some sort of international proper tournament. This stuff, I feel like it's been unnecessary burden on a lot of players as well. But realistically, it's all about the Premier League. It's all about the beautiful game in Britain. That's what I care about. So yeah, I'm happy that it's back. Also, I'm really happy with a lot of stuff that we've been doing over the international break. Just for some people, we've been plugging it quite a bit. So like you say with Dr. Raj, if you don't know about the stuff that we've been doing over the international break, why haven't you been paying attention? We've done a great 3-part series on what we expect as trends towards the end of the season, so check any of those 3 videos out. I recommend that you do watch all 3 just to help you with your teams or whatever you want to do. And we've got the usual content as well, as mentioned there, Dr. Raj. We've got some other stuff and a very special Q&A session there where Ben literally answered anything and everything, from what his favourite breakfast cereal was to does he holiday in Cumbria, which was a resounding no. I think you were even slightly insulted that you were asked that, weren't you, Ben?
Yeah. Look, I mean, no offense to any Cumbrians in the house, by the way. But it's not a holiday destination that features, highly on my, on my bucket list, shall we say? So, yeah, no offense intended, but I shan't be holidaying in Cumbria anytime soon.
That's a shame. Cumbria will be missing you, Ben. But yeah, let's talk about game week 30 then. And we will talk about some of the stuff that we raised in the videos, but I really do recommend so that you understand the data and kind of the explanations behind it. But I think the big thing going into game week 30 onwards is planning your team, planning your transfers for this basic 9-game run towards the end of the season. I'm basing a lot of my choices on the last 8 game weeks to help me with the next 9. But kind of starting off then, I think a good place to look at is teams with the best runs into the end of the season. So we'll look at that. We'll look at teams with difficult runs as well. There's quite a few things to go through. So the first of all, the best team with the best run towards the end of the season is Liverpool. From now till the final game of the season, they're up there. And kind of on the surface of it, I think Salah, maybe TAA, those are ones that might grab your attention. But I think there are worries around them as well. West Ham, I think they've got a lot of players that you could be potentially interested in. Wolves, a side that potentially have nothing to play for, which again is something that could spell interesting games. Arsenal are also up there in the top group. So kind of looking at those initially, Ben, any of those teams that attract you? Because for me, I think out of that group of good fixtures towards the end of the season, really only West Ham are the ones that catch my eye.
Yeah, have to agree with you there, Jason. We've touched upon the work that we've been doing, mainly you've been doing during the international break, and we identified a small cohort of teams in and around that sort of 7th, 8th and 9th position, that just happens to contain sort of Arsenal and Liverpool. And those teams are at greatest risk of dropping below their average points per game ratio from the first sort of 29 game weeks during this running period. And for me, that fits quite well with Arsenal, because the concerns at this point are, realistically, will Mikel Arteta be looking at that league table and thinking, it's gone, pushing for European places, maybe within that Premier League is going to be a little bit of a bridge too far, but we have an opportunity in the Europa League. And if we can win that, However unlikely that may seem, we could qualify for the Champions League. So almost does that become a priority now for Mikel Arteta? So that would be a worry. And also I look at that Arsenal team, and does anybody really jump out of me in that team? I am a fan of Arsenal. I do like them, but when I'm looking to try and bring players in, I just don't see the value in Aubameyang. He runs too hot and cold. The same with Lacazette. More than capable of producing on the day, but it's just that lack of consistency. If anybody, it would be maybe Odegaard, just for a little bit of value in that. But like I say, I'll be keeping me powder dry away from Arsenal at the moment. I do like Liverpool. I think that maybe is a team that could buck that trend and, potentially just sort of kick on between now and the end of the season. The one that I really do like would be Diogo Jota. But we've seen Roberto Firmino back on the training pitches now, and while Jota fully deserves his place in that team, he's come back from injury, he's scored against his former club, he's done well during the international break. I'm looking at that Liverpool front three and thinking, how's Jurgen Klopp gonna set his team up? Is he going to drop Mane? He's not going to drop Salah. It's going to be Firmino. Now, could it be Jota and Firmino, rotating and flip-flopping? And I just don't know. So that would be the concern for me. Wolves, no, have not been impressed with them at all this season. But I'm with you with West Ham. We're talking about a team that has momentum, has confidence. They're obviously playing for their manager. They have belief, and they have an opportunity now to not only finish in them European places, but it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to maybe go into that top four and maybe a Champions League qualification spot. So and with Souček, Lingard, the form of Antonio, and defensively, how they've performed over the course of the season, they stand every chance of being able to break that. And look, it's going to be interesting. So when teams have got that appetite and they'll be playing till the 90th minute until the last game of the season, then they become an appealing sort of fantasy prospect.
Yeah, this is the thing. I think the data points to a lot of this as well. Obviously, the data that we've kind of created in terms of these teams and trends, but also going into it, Liverpool is a hard one. I think the rotation risk with a lot of those players is kind of high as well, especially if they keep in the Champions League. The further that they go, the more kind of protection they're going to offer to their players. Then looking at West Ham, I think they're the best pick of the bunch. And I think the hard decision is going to be whether they do what the usual European teams do and have a more steely defence and maybe less attack. So it might be only good to have Antonio, Cresswell and Kufal or Fabianski, somebody like that. Wolves, no interest at the moment, apart from maybe Pedro Neto. The interesting thing with their placement in the league and the fact that they've got nothing to play for, defensively they've not been good this season. And so when teams have nothing to play for, they don't improve their defence, but they do improve goal output. And they do have that potential there. So maybe if there was any player that I was looking at, especially with that good kind of chunk of fixtures coming up soon, where they play those teams that are likely to be relegated, it's kind of the good combination between relegated teams who basically have nothing to play for / don't do well anyway in that bad game week period, and Wolves who have nothing to play for but are much better than them, might equal Pedro Neto scoring or getting quite a few goals, but it could also just mean that Wolves continue in their poor trend, which they've been through this season. I think at his price point, he's worth a punt. And maybe for people that do have Rafinha. Arsenal, not looking at all. The Europa League kind of rotation risk is too much for me. And also the fact that they haven't had good data. A lot of people talk about the improvements in defence. We're not letting in as many goals as we used to. So only 9 goals in the last 6 games. But that's bad in comparison to the XG conceded of only 7. And 0 clean sheets in the last 6. I can't be interested in a defence. And then with the attack hasn't been good either. So there's really no appeal, even though that they've got, on paper, good fixtures. Moving on to teams with the most difficult runs, and some of these I think we've got to exploit, and some of these I think kind of indicate teams that should be avoided now going towards the end of the season. Crystal Palace have the worst run of fixtures. 100%, I think people need to target them. Kind of again, going back to the point of they've got nothing to play for. We did the research, 36, 37 points is where teams are basically safe. Crystal Palace, they're basically safe now. They've not been good this season. Defensively, their data is absolutely dreadful. So I think captaining players that might be playing them, maybe a Calvert-Lewin this weekend, is a great idea. There could be a lot of high-scoring goals with Crystal Palace involved. And the fact that about half their squad are out of contract at the end of the season. So there's no real impetus for a lot of these players to give more for that club because they're not going to be there anymore. Brighton, Man City and Aston Villa also join CPFC, and West Brom do as well at the bottom there with the most difficult run of fixtures. So, what do you think about CPFC, Brighton, Man City, Villa and West Brom in terms of them? Can we exploit those bad fixtures in terms of playing against them? And are there any of those players in those teams that you think they're still all right to own, even though they've got a difficult run?
I'm definitely 100% looking at targeting Crystal Palace. I've got several Everton players earmarked for this weekend's game, potential captaincy options with Richarlison, maybe even Digne. I'm expecting Everton to batter them, if the truth be known. Roy Hodgson indicated that it's only likely that Tariq Mitchell will come back into that squad. They have a minimum of 6 players currently sidelined. And what I took from today's press conference, so we're recording on Thursday, so Roy Hodgson was up nice and early, really considering Palace don't play until Monday. And this was something that I think we voiced before with regards to the Roy Hodgson and these managers who continually, year on year, season on season, regardless of which club they're at, which league they're playing, if you to aggregate their points total across a set number of games, Roy Hodgson basically has a set points total, and he doesn't really deviate far from that throughout his whole managerial career. Now, if I'm right in thinking, the average for Roy Hodgson is in and around 43 points, if memory recalls, and he's never been, above or below that by more than 5 points, only a very small percentage. Now, that tells me that already, Palace are taking the foot off the gas. And just to sort of reiterate and back up that theory, Roy Hodgson has already come out at today's press conference and said, look, the pressure's off now. We can relax. We've basically secured our top flight status. We played a couple of big games, in a really sort of high pressure environment. Now it's time to relax a little bit, let the football flow. And so, yeah, I think that opens up a can of worms for that Palace team. And I'm expecting them to sort of to get battered, if the truth be known. I think they will be treading water between now and the end of the season. There's a little bit of dead wood that needs to be shifted. You can see maybe the likes of Wilfred Zaha departing as well in the summer. There's not going to be no real sort of swan song. There's no European football he needs to be playing on a bigger stage. I think he's given enough now for the Eagles down at Selhurst Park, so that I will target them. The data from our research has suggested that, we cannot expect much more from West Brom and Sam Allardyce. And can we target them? I think they're going to be more of an avoid as opposed to target. I still think Sam will keep it pretty tight, and it may be difficult. There may be a team that you want to pick for clean sheets against. So, if you're playing against the Baggies, maybe, go for a clean sheet as opposed to a team that's going to score a lot against West Brom. For me, And did you say, was it Manchester City? There was one of those as well.
Man
Um,
City and Aston Villa, along with Brighton. I think Brighton, we've said our piece before, haven't we? That we're kind of avoiding them anyway because they're so poor. But yeah, City, and I think Villa are actually one of the most interesting ones to talk about.
Look, we're expecting Jack Grealish to return this weekend. He's certainly been back on the training pitches. Given his status within that Villa team, ordinarily, would I expect somebody to be thrown straight back in there, maybe after 4, possibly 5 weeks out, how long it's been? Maybe not. But we are talking about Jack Grealish and his influence in this Villa team. And also, he's had an opportunity to work on the training pitches during this international break. So that's maybe, leveled the playing field in terms of his fitness. I'm still not sold on Villa yet. I might have to wait a game week or two. I really do like Manchester City. I think they transcend all fixtures, but unfortunately, I'm not willing to take that risk in a punt and bringing in many Manchester City assets, because we've seen, I think, the last 3 Premier League games, in terms of changes, I think there's been 17 across 3 games. We've had 2 changes of 7 and 1 change of 3. And that will only become more and more evident, the fact that Pep's got a full squad to choose from. They're going deeper into European competition, and they also have the Carabao Cup final coming up as well, and there's still involvement in the FA Cup, so you have that quadruple. Factor in all of those things, and then you have Sergio Aguero leaving, so there's always going to be that question mark on, is there going to be a bit of a sentimental pick of throwing Sergio Aguero in there? Is he not? Will he start with Gabriel Jesus anyway? Will he start with neither? Look, there's just too much going on in that City lineup for me. So while I do like them, and the data will suggest that they will push on and keep on improving until the end of the season, I just can't justify the outlay, given, you're talking some premium players, maybe a Gundogan, like I say, given his price point, maybe a Foden, but on the understanding, that those players are potential rotation risks. I'm moving away from him, if the truth be known. I'll probably stick with Diaz. And if I wanted to double up maybe in that back line, it would be Edison.
I've done the same. I've only got Diaz in my side now because just the rotation risk is far too high for premium assets at the price that they are. Looking at the final team there, though, Aston Villa, you're a little bit warmer on them than I am. And the reason why I'm not is because, first of all, are they a team that have nothing to play for? Are they realistically going to get into Europe? I think it's quite unlikely. They've done what their main kind of... Oh crap, my cat just scared the life out of me. She does this all the time. I'll finish what I'm saying and then I will have to put her outside. So the thing with Aston Villa is that, do they have anything to play for coming towards the end of this season? And I'm not too sure if they do. They've basically accomplished all that they need to. The other thing is they had poor attacking, defensive and attacking data before Grealish got injured. They weren't creating a lot of good chances. And yes, they've kept 5 clean sheets recently, but what I would say is they've heavily overperformed. And we kind of said this with Martinez. A lot of people kind of believing in him, having them in their sides. And I'm not too sure if he is a wise owner at the moment. So for that reason, I would avoid them because it's difficult fixtures. I wouldn't exploit them, but I would move away. Maybe transferring out Martinez to somebody like a Fabianski, to a Mendy. I mean, would you go as far as that?
Ooh, I do have a wild card still intact, and so it wouldn't be like I was busting a transfer on a goalkeeper, which ordinarily I wouldn't look to be doing. I mean, I'm not that unhappy with Martinez and Leno as a goalkeeping pairing. But if I've got a wild card there, yeah, then I certainly wouldn't be averse to maybe freshening things up and changing things around. Like I say, I'm going to be freeing up some City slots, so Edison could be one. And like you say, we'd go back, we've done all of that work, we've looked at all of the underlying data, we've looked at the trends. It would be a shame not to put some of that into good practice in the hope of maybe finding, one or two little gems between now and the run-in. And Fabianski, could be one of those. Like I say, West Ham have got everything to play for, so and we know he's going to be nailed down for a starting spot. So if fit, of course.
So let's move it then on to the data. And, like I said, last 8 game weeks worth of data to help us with the decisions going into the final 9. Looking at the attacks first and foremost, because you said it before, we're in Kevin Keegan mode, aren't we? We're going for attack, and I would love it. You have to do the impression. I would love it.
I would love it. I would love it.
Exactly. I would love it if a differential, like differential Dinnery, paid off. Best attacks over the last 8 game weeks. Man City, Man United, Leicester, West Ham, Leeds. Brighton are in there as well, but obviously data-wise, they're hugely underperforming. And then worst attacks, I don't think there's too many surprises apart from maybe one. Crystal Palace, Sheffield United, Newcastle, Wolves, and then Aston Villa. So looking at that, the only one that we've not discussed there kind of is maybe Leeds, but more so Leicester. They do have a fairly mixed run towards the end of the season. Vardy is probably quite a good pick in my mind, just because he's that brilliant. Other ones, maybe defensively. So going back to our data, they are a European team. They might be fighting for clean sheets, maybe a defensive asset. But then, first and foremost, they do have their injury issues. The second point is they haven't kept many clean sheets either. I think they've got this like Arsenal effect where they played all right defensively. They've not let in many goals, but they've not kept clean sheets, the bread and butter. So realistically, I think it's hard in my mind to maybe justify a defensive asset, but maybe a Jamie Vardy towards the end of the season, he might want to end with a flurry of goals.
Oh, I had concerns about Leicester when James Maddison was sidelined. Harvey Barnes picked up quite a serious knee injury, and it was almost for me. I was looking back to last season and how that project restart, that running, they literally did capitulate. They were so far off the boil, it was unbelievable. But that hasn't happened this time around. Coupled with with a few decent Premier League results, you have that great win in the FA Cup as well. And Kelechi Iheanacho has really come to the fore. Probably for the first time in his Leicester career, he's maybe starting to pay off that big chunk of change that they paid for him, fulfilling some of that potential. Maybe it's coincided with his longest run in the team, or maybe sustained minutes, certainly within that Leicester team. And he looks like he's enjoying his football. But we had Brendan Rodgers speak on Thursday. We know that James Maddison now is going to be coming back into contention. I don't expect him to start, by the way, this weekend. In terms of his sharpness, he's probably just a little bit off the pace. But, that then puts pressure on Brendan Rodgers to maybe change that setup ever so slightly and tweak things. And, he's not going to drop Jamie Vardy ever. So let's forget that. So it's always going to be, Kelechi is always going to be that player that if he feels he needs to change things up, and a fully fit James Maddison starts. Harvey Barnes, well, we've got a few more weeks, so I'm not sure if I'd go with Vardy. I think I might go with a value pick and go with Kelechi with that, just because I just don't trust Jamie Vardy enough. He's not a player I particularly enjoy owning. I like his record. I like what he's done. He's clinical and then I can appreciate but as a fantasy asset, I find him just frustrating because I crave more from him. I want more involvement. I want that threat. I don't want these little 30-second, 1-minute bursts where he can change a game, or he can, produce 1 minute moment of brilliance. I need to just see more of him because I find myself just getting frustrated, and the red mist, and the emotion starts to rule their head, and I can't. So Kalechi just gives us a little bit more bang for me buck, and certainly he's carrying the form at this moment in time.
Yeah, the interesting thing over the last 6 game weeks, I kind of kept an eye on this as well, as is that form of Leicester last season. And they've actually kind of almost upped to gear a little bit. They've got 14 goals in their last 6 games. But exactly what you're saying there, Jamie Vardy has not only been a frustrating figure with not doing too much, although he has had a fair number of shots in the box, the joint second most over the last 6 game weeks, but he hasn't scored them. He's not matched his XG, whereas Iheanacho has, and he has been taking quite a few shots. He has a higher XGI than Vardy over that game week. He has a higher XG over the last few game weeks, so maybe that 5.7 punt on him isn't too crazy after all. Whereas with Vardy, 10.1 mil, that's kind of Harry Kane money, isn't it? That, and you'd have to really kind of change up your team to be able to facilitate getting him in. Just for me, when Leicester usually score, although like I said there, with their 14 goals, Vardy's only contributed 1. Normally I would expect it to be Vardy either scoring or assisting, and he is on the penalties as well. That's why I would have him in, but at the cost that he is, it is quite a big gamble. And I'm not sure I would do it at the moment. And I quite like the strikers that are in my team. Calvert-Lewin, as we said, is playing Everton. He plays for Everton against Crystal Palace. It's not a bad run towards the end of the season. Antonio, think he's a fine, firm fixture. And then Harry Kane, he has some good fixtures against some really bad opponents. So would I get Vardy in over any of them? Maybe Calvert-Lewin when some of those more difficult games come in, but yeah, it's a difficult one to kind of manoeuvre around. Let's move on then onto defensive data, and the worst defences, best defences. Starting with the best defence, Chelsea over the last 6 game weeks. The kind of conundrum there is who to get in. How can we trust them? Because with our data that we found, 20% more rotation towards that end of season time. Thomas Tuchel loves a good squad overhaul week to week anyway. You just don't know what's going to happen. He is like a Forrest Gump manager. His life is like a box of chocolates with him. Man United, Man City, West Ham, Brighton are all up there. But again, I don't really include Brighton in that gap because they just not be matching up their data. Worst defences, Sheffield United, Southampton, Villa in terms of data, but not with clean sheets, Everton and Crystal Palace. So looking at that, I think the big conundrum, as I said there, is Chelsea. I think Man United are fine in terms of Wan-Bissaka. Maybe if you want a Harry Maguire because he does have that aerial threat. And I'm happy to take the risk with Shaw just because he has that amazing numbers. And then with West Ham, it is kind of Kufal, Cresswell, Fabianski. One of them will serve you well. Kufal and Cresswell obviously have the creative ability, but Fabianski is going to be starting in between the sticks, and it may mean that you can have somebody else in your defensive backline that maybe you want to have in there. So looking at that, we've kind of talked about Everton as well as a fairly good maybe team towards the end of the season. Maybe a Digne, with some of those poorer defences that they play against. But looking at the fact that they're in the bottom half of the table, one of the worst defences data-wise, would that put you off owning their assets?
I don't think so. I think we're coming into a part of a stage of the season now where I'm going to be expecting goals, fatigue, quick turnarounds, unsettled, backlines with rotation, and teams and managers maybe not having the opportunities to play settled backlines. For example, if we look at Everton just ahead of Monday night's game, Ben Godfrey looks like he's picked up a knock for the under 21s. We're not sure. You have maybe Tom Davies as well, who's been sitting in there. And I know he's not a defender, but being able to shield maybe that Everton backline just a little bit. He's picked up a knock. Also, Alan, is he up to speed? I'm not sure yet after that lengthy sort of problem. So, these have like little knock-on effects for the rest of the team. So if I was going to go for anybody from between now until the end of the season, I'm going to be looking for those defenders who probably offer the biggest attacking threat. And Dina, for me, is that, primarily when I'm looking at Dina, I'm not thinking necessarily about how many clean sheets Everton will get. I'm thinking more of the mindset that Dina is an attacking midfielder and he's going to be returning assists. And that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a good budget value midfielder with him in terms of my mindset when I'm thinking about it. And anything else over and above maybe is a bonus in terms of clean sheets, and which they'll be more than capable of doing. By the way, like I say, they're getting a few players back from injury, and they've had that little bit of a downturn. They've had that little bit of a poor run. I think the absence of Jordan Pickford could even help them. I know before the break, Carlo Ancelotti said he expected both keepers to return in game week 30, so that would be Robin Olsen as well. However, local media reports suggest that it may be towards the back end of April before Jordan Pickford is actually returning, seeing his injuries a little bit worse than first feared. So we'll wait to hear what Ancelotti says on Friday with regards to that. But for me, having somebody like Olsen is in goal, I think that just adds a little bit more stability to that Everton. He mightn't be as good a shot stopper, but his all-round game is a lot more solid. And I think that you know what you're getting with him, as opposed to Jordan Pickford, where his little arms don't even know.
Old
Not
T-Rex
well.
arms. T-Rex arms, mate.
Yeah, but yeah, so I think I would feel more confident with that Everton defence if Robin Olsen is actually tipped to return in goal this weekend. Or even the young lad who played in the FA Cup, played really well. He was a little bit unfortunate with the goals he conceded against Manchester City, if I recall now, which seems like an absolute lifetime ago. But yeah, I'm going to go out all guns blazing in this final running. I'm looking for a serious upturn in attacking returns.
Might I interest you then with an attacking threat, defensive asset, Mr. Trent of Alexander of Arnold? He actually sits highest with Robertson for the best expected points of defensive players until the end of the season. He is fairly differential as well, Ben. Only 13% ownership, so I think that might entice you a little bit as well. I can just see your eyes lighting up there. You're thinking, ooh, differential. Liverpool, with that fantastic run of fixtures towards the end of the season, he's also been rested in this period. He wasn't picked for England. And in looking at his actual individual data over the last few game weeks, he's been highly creative. I think he's got the highest XGI of any defender over the last 6 game weeks. So looking at that, the last 8 game weeks, he has the highest XA of 1.97. Second only in terms of all players to Riyad Mahrez. Nice points for him. The only point is the rotation risk, but realistically, do you think that his place is under threat? Liverpool don't really have a backup right back. He's going to be starting week in, week out. That's the kind of problem with Liverpool. Robertson and him are almost nailed because they don't have anybody else there to back them up. Would that tickle your fancy at all, Mr. Ben?
Sold. I will take that, man. I will take that, man, at 13%. I'm sitting on 10 million in the bank as it currently stands. So funds are not an issue. I really like the pick of Trent. Couple of reasons. One, he obviously didn't join up with the England squad. Secondly, Not only did he not join up with him, but it was almost as if Gareth Southgate hung him out to dry a little bit with comments with regards of his level of performance. And he sort of suggested or indicated that, he hasn't been the Trent of old. Well, talking to people in the know who really know their stuff with regards to Trent, and what they've said was, in terms of his outputs in the last 6 game weeks, Trent has been back to his old self, even surpassing some of that data. So, I think what Southgate was maybe just looking excuses, considering he included some players in that squad, that have been well off the boat for a long time. So I think Trent will feel that he's got a point to prove. And while there's a lot of players who are in and around that England squad who you maybe would have considered a shoe-in for the European Championships, now maybe Trent's thinking, actually, I've got to pull my socks up and I've got to put in the performances to earn that place in that Three Lions squad. And so, yes, look, for me, he ticks a lot of boxes. And I haven't owned Trent previously because his ownership levels have just been ridiculous and he doesn't fit with my anti-template type model. But at 13%, I'd class for a high profile premium defender. I mean, that's differential enough for me.
Oh, well, I like that because I think I may follow suit just with him in terms of Liverpool assets. Looking at the expected points of just some other positions before we kind of get to our concluding comments. Best expected points for midfielders: Salah, Fernandes, Mane, Kevin De Bruyne, Aubameyang and Son going towards the end of the season. I don't think too many surprises there. Maybe happy to go without Salah for a little bit, but I might have to reconsider. But it's this kind of little bit of drop off with Liverpool. I think Alexander-Arnold might be all right because I think Liverpool are going to try and work on their defensive output. But then I think all teams are going to concede more towards this end of the season. But there is that ability for him to get involved with the goals. And it's almost like a Salah light with Trent Alexander-Arnold. He has that potential for some clean sheets. I'm not sure Liverpool are as good as they once were in terms of that, but there is that ability to get involved with goals or assists. So I like that. And then with expected points for strikers, now there's one in here, is Aguero, but that's because, obviously he plays for Man City, but I don't think he'll be playing that often. So expected points, Kane, Vardy is second, so I think that this again enhances his appeal just a little bit for me. Then it's Aguero, who I don't think will play, Antonio and Bamford. I like that. I think I'm happy with the coverage that I have with Rafinha instead of Bamford. Rafinha's had sensational kind of XGI over the last 6 game weeks, and in terms of expected points for players over the last 6 game weeks, he has the highest involvement. So he's not quite matched that, but it's still great for a really cheap midfielder. And just moving it on to the final kind of little bits here. There's 2 questions that I do have to ask you, Ben. Spurs, there's a double game week coming up. How many assets do we have? I've got Son, I've got Kane. Do I get Reguilon as well? Do I cover with that, or is that a bit over the top?
It depends if Reguilon's fit, first and foremost. Picked up that foot injury prior to the international break. And this is one of those instances where, we shouldn't take what players, coaches, report, social media updates, we shouldn't take them literally just after the game. Always treat them with a pinch of salt, because what we've seen was Sergio Reguilon come out and said, it's fine, there's no problem, nothing serious. He's got 2 weeks off the international break, so you would fully expect him to return to the squad in game week 30. However, he's only involved in light training at the moment, or was up until Wednesday. I'm not sure what happened on Thursday. Now, again, that puts question marks over his availability this weekend. We know that Ben Davies has suffered what they described as a significant setback in terms of a calf injury. So that indicates that it could be sort of mid to late April before Ben Davies is back with the group. And yeah, so there's question marks with Reguilon. I'm just not too sold on Tottenham per se. If I was going to go for anybody in that back line, he would be that player. I mean, if you wanted a punt, and I don't like him really as a footballer, but as a fantasy asset, Serge Aura, does tend to get his fair share of attacking returns. I mean, you forget about his defensive frailties, and but going forward, he does offer sort of one or two maybe attacking points. So he might be somebody that look at, but obviously he comes under the threat of maybe a Matt Doherty. So maybe the Reguilon, if he was fit, and we should find out through Jose Mourinho's press conference on Friday whether he will be available or not. And it would be, there would be worse places to start him in your team than a trip to St James's Park, who are really, look to be devoid of all confidence at this moment in time.
Let's move it on to another side, though, that does have a double game week coming up. Is Southampton. Danny Ings. Now, I think he's quite an interesting one to talk about. He's coming back from injury. It depends how much Hasenhüttl kind of wraps him in cotton wool, kind of protects him. As you'd say, I love the phrase, kid gloves, kind of just protecting him like that. With Danny Ings and Southampton, we saw last season, when they had nothing to play for, they stepped up another level during Project Restart. Again, they're another team like Crystal Palace. They're safe enough. They're going to relax a little bit coming towards the end of the season. They have fairly decent attacking players. James Ward-Prowse is a pretty good midfielder. They've got some good wingers in there and a good strike force of Shea Adams and obviously Danny Ings. There's potential there for a Southampton side to maybe kick on, maybe pick up a few more points, but also score a fair few goals because they do have that capacity, and we've seen it kind of throughout the season. So what do you think about maybe him as a very maverick punt for towards the end of the season?
Yeah, I've been looking at Southampton ahead of game week 30, and obviously we've seen Theo Walcott and Danny Ings back on the training pitches. So that's a boost. They're getting some of their attacking players back. So I do think Southampton are a cut above of some of those teams in and around them, and they have the capability of being able to kick on and really sort of move into that top half of the table. Trying to work out that starting 11 this weekend is a difficult one for me. We've seen Shea Adams, who's been in decent form. He had a bit of a lull, but he's stepped up, scored for Scotland as well, his first goal. And then we also seen a good performance in the FA Cup from Southampton down at Bournemouth. And Nathan Redmond, he put his line in the sand, and I think he scored a couple of goals in that game. Earned plaudits from Hasenhüttl. He played in that striking role as well. And I'm, you talk about squad management here, and you're talking about players. You're managing personalities. If you're Nathan Redmond and you put in a performance like that, regardless of the fact that it was in the FA Cup away at Bournemouth, and you score 2 goals, you want to be one of the first names on that team sheet. And if he's moved out of position again for a Danny Ings, or he's getting dropped for a Danny Ings, what message is that sending you, and what does that do in terms of maybe that I know you've got to be ruthless as a manager, but if I was Nathan Redmond and I wasn't in that starting 11 this weekend, I certainly wouldn't be happy. I think Shea Adams deserves to be in that starting 11 because of his performances. So then you question, right, well, is there room for Danny Ings? If Southampton get another good result this weekend and those players play well, where does that leave Danny Ings? And it could be, he is being rumoured to potentially, hankering for a move away for a bigger stage. Maybe Ralph Hasenhüttl looks at that and thinks, well, maybe this is the future for my Southampton team, and maybe do we look to cash in on a Danny Ings who, has had some well-documented injury problems. So it's one that I would maybe just hang fire a little bit and just see how this plays out. Again, he's coming off the back of an injury, and he could be managed between now and the end of the season as well. You don't want another serious setback that could potentially rule him out for any significant period.
The one final team that we both kind of like in terms of running towards the end of the season, Burnley, fairly good fixtures towards the end, 5th best for fixture difficulty, and they actually play 3 out of the 4 relegation sides. Again, a group that we identified as low scoring anyway, but that downturns once you kind of hit that nothing to play for / game week 30 onward period. I think Loughton himself has put in some impressive attacking numbers, so he might be one to get in for that. Are you liking the looks of Burnley? I wouldn't go with their attack, even though they're playing those relegation sides. I think the value, as always, is in their defence.
Yeah, 100% agree. I've been on Matt Loughton for quite a few weeks now, even before he started scoring goals and everybody started jumping on the bandwagon. We've discussed it many times before. That Burnley backline do offer a lot of value. They're not going to give too many goals away inherently unless they're playing Manchester City. In Nick Pope, they've got a great keeper, again, full of confidence. State his claim for an England starting place now. Left back spot, there's a little bit of a question mark with regards to whether Charlie Taylor will come back in or Eric Peters. But in terms of the centre back partnership, they're Ben Mee and Tarkowski. They're going to be there. So Sean Dyche knows what he's doing. It's 4-4-2. It's solid. There's going to be very little rotation. Jack Cork could return again. He sort of boasts as that midfield and makes Burnley a very hard team to sort of break down. So I wouldn't go overboard with Burnley. I still think one asset is good and is more than adequate. If you're feeling a little bit frisky, then plumb for 2. But I'm happy with Loughton, and I'll just stick with the 1, going forward.
To finish off, captaincy picks for this week. As always, we remind people that Ben has the set and forget Rashford captain for altruistic reasons, and we salute you for that. But in terms of if you were to pick a captain this game week, which player would you go for from these kind of tough fixtures that we're looking at?
Yeah, so depending on who I may or may not bring in, I'll just stick with the team that I've currently got. There's 2 standout picks for me. Rafinha, and this is purely based on the opposition. I think Paul Higginbottom, he's got a tough job on his hands. I still think that, Sheffield United team are reeling from the departure of Chris Wilder. And while I don't expect another 5-0 hammering, Leicester style, I still think Leeds could easily push on and get 2-3. And you're always looking at Rafinha or Bamford. And the second one is a team that we highlighted before and targeted, and that's Palace. And yeah, I'm going for maybe the Brazilian, and that would be Richarlison.
I like it.
So the 2 R's.
Yes, 2 R's indeed. I mean, you could say that you're a pirate. Arr. But I agree with Rafinha. He's currently my provisional captain at the moment. I think DCL, because obviously he's in my team, I think he's a good pick at the moment. But Richarlison, I think, is another good one who can exploit a very poor Crystal Palace side. I think a lot of people are looking at Kane against Newcastle. I think the problem with Newcastle and Kane is that Tottenham will be happy with a 1-0, 2-0. They'll kind of shut up shop then. They don't kill off games very much. They don't go for that 5 or 6-0 like they do, like they might have done under Pochettino. They don't do that under Mourinho. And so, whilst I think Kane will get involved with something, there could be a goal, there could be assist, I just feel like there's a cap on his performance. And I think this is an opportunity to actually do well with a differential captain, kind of going against a lot of the usual rules that I play by here in terms of the season where I'd normally captain a premium asset. But this week, I don't think you have to. I think that actually the less premium Rafina offers a much better opportunity. But yeah, that is the end of this week's program. I hope that you find it helpful for your game week 30 and onward, because we're trying to give a more long-term view here. Obviously, we're giving the captaincy insights, but this is how we're kind of thinking about playing towards the end of the season. Have that longevity in mind so that you don't have to do too many transfers and your team is protected. As always, remember to subscribe. We've got so much good content here on Premier Injuries. Do check out the fantastic work that we've done over this international break period. And I'm just going to hand it over to Ben to sign us out. And I wish you all the best of luck.
Yeah, thanks once again, Jason. Look, we've had a really busy couple of weeks, and as Jason's alluded to, and as we've mentioned several times before, if you haven't been following our content on the YouTube channel, why not? Believe you and me, honestly, there's a lot of hard work and effort going into preparing this type of content, and there are a lot of insights to be gleaned. So if you're looking to gain that edge in your mini league or improve your overall rank, over these remaining game weeks, then I'm sure you will find a couple of nuggets in that. But for now, this evening, we're done. Keep your eyes and ears peeled for more videos dropping, and we'll see you all again very soon. But for now, boom.